Good afternoon to everyone. Okay, now the class is continues before class, right? So, assess. Then we need to assess the cost and benefit of each alternative, right? So, everything has social, economic, and in economics. So this is so the cost and benefit analysis is very important, and that will determine which alternative is the best response, right? So that should use the monetary valuations. So where possible, it can also give the qualitative information. So through quantitative data, right? So quantitative data that relies on economic or ecological expertise. So the qualitative data most often comes from community sources, right? Community sources. So including the equally considering, right? Equally considering qualitative data. That is public participation is also taken seriously. So that can also be carried out effectively, right? So then next we are going to select an alternative. So by selecting alternatives, we should recognize the constraints the country and the region, social and cultural and political values, right? So the selection, it should reflect an equitable sharing of the distribution of benefits, so that are derived from the uses of biological resources, right? So, and making the selection, right? So making the selection and supporting reasons explicitly to the public health, that is to ensure the equitable distribution, right? So, and next, then we are going to methodology for terrestrial flora and fauna assessment. So we can have the desk-based evaluation for all the relevant information. So first of all, so this is done by doing some existing review of literature database and site-specific information for the some of the specific areas, right? And the next, that is proposed a list of potentially threatened to flora and fauna species. So that should be listed out, then a land cover and a vegetation map, which should be made the area of the development project is overlaid. So that to determine the direct impact for that flora and fauna, right? Flora and fauna. So in that particular area. So that will be used to delineate and stratify the sampling sites for the flora and the fauna assessment, right? So then next we are going to baseline studies. So what are the baseline studies? So this is an important and first stage study. So it is important in gaining an understanding of how the system might be changed by the proposed project. And it can take a snapshot of the existing conditions, that is baseline environment. Okay. So, and the next, the baseline survey. So the baseline survey provides the necessary information on the site specific environmental setting of the project area. And that should include information about the components of the biodiversity. So for example, the ecosystem, right? Ecosystem and the species. So ecosystem and the species particular that may be affected, right? So baseline studies established a foundation for impact prediction, right? Impact prediction for monitoring the predicted impacts and for evaluating the success of this mitigation measures, right? So next, we are going to baseline survey. So what are the things to be considered in the baseline survey? Okay. So those are, first one is site characterization and second one is survey methods, right? So this is the baseline survey methods, right? So next, we are going to a combination of some different methods, right? So combination of different methods is also being used. For example, transects, quadrats, transit count, and mixed nets, trapping, active searching, sampling efforts, biodiversity index, and duration of the survey and evaluation, right? So duration of this survey. So it is also important. So this should be long enough for gathering the necessary baseline data. So it is generally the duration of the ecological survey. It should be commensurate with the scale of the proposed development and also the diversity of the habitats within the study area and the diversity of the flora and fauna within the study area, right? So evaluation, it means impact analysis, right? So after establishing the baseline study, so then we have to work systematically through the various activities and aspects of the development to determine the likely effect of those activities on these baseline studies, right? So next. The following should be considered. So that is the evaluation impact analysis, that is the nature of the impact and the likely magnitude of the residual impact and the level of the impact, right? So these are the impact analysis. So the nature of the impact. So this is the direct or indirect, right? Direct or indirect, a long-term or shorter, and effects from the cumulative impacts, right? So all these need to be noted down. So the type of impact is positive, which is enhancing biodiversity. So then negative, so that is causing biodiversity loss, or neutral, that is causing no net change, right? No net change. So, and then next, the likely magnitude of the residual impact. This impact, so suppose X hectares or X area of ecosystem or habitat, so and X number of individual of species, right? So these are the some of the examples. So then the level of the impact, the species, right? So the species are ecosystem level. So that is the species richness, the diversity and endemicity and vulnerability. So all these has to be observed in this impact, right? So the next, finally, so the biotic factors. Biotic factors are also used for the analysis of environmental impact on vegetation and wildlife, right? So they can be categorized as biotic assessment. So biotic assessment uses the presence and condition and abundance of species of fish and mammals and birds, insects, algae, plants, and other organisms. So that is to determine the health of an ecosystem, and it will provide information on the physical and chemical characteristics that are present, right? So example, nutrient enrichment and pollutants, and also flow rate, and also the sediments levels, right? So these are important tools to assess the environmental impact and bio indicators, right? So they help us to predict the natural state of any region or the degree of contaminations present in the study area, right? So biological assessment. So an example of biological assessment in the field, so biological survey that is conducted on different streams, for example, to determine the stream structures, right? Stream structures. So the benthic macroinvertebrate assemblage is a biological indicator. So then the matrices such as the relative richness, these can be selected. So the condition represented by the undisturbed or minimally disturbed are reference sites that is used to assess the changes in the different values from other communities with increasing sites. So as the level of stress increases in these streams, the aquatic communities and compositions were measurably changed. Right? So the species that are sensitive to stress disappear and more pollution tolerant species are found. So those species were identified in order to indicate their general level of sensitivity and ability to tolerate pollution. So for example, you see here intermediate species, moderately tolerate species, and tolerant species. So intermediate species, so we can denote them as S, right? Yes. Yes. And moderately tolerant species. So these are also denoted by M, capital M, right? And tolerant species. So it can be denoted by the capital T. So intermediate is S and moderately is M, tolerant means T, right? So that is the biotic assessment, right? So we have understood some basic concepts in the wildlife and vegetation impact analysis and what are the technique and the process so that are employed for the same, right? So, and we also got to know about the biological indicators and also the stress responses in the biotic assessment, like how the species can be identified and how we can indicate their general sensitivity to stress and how they can tolerate the pollution, right? So these are some ways how we can analyze impact assessment in various habitats, right? So wait. So next, now we are going to second book C8, right? C6 is environment assessment is complete, only biological, right? Now we are going to, so all of you see this PPT, say yes or no? Anybody? Montreal Protocol.
Yes, ma'am.
All of you see this PPT?
Yes, madam.
Are you able to see this PPT?
Yes, madam.
Next 24th.
Bhagyam,
Yes, madam.
are you able to see this PPT? Montreal Protocol?
Yes, madam.
Okay, okay, right. Thank you. So we are going to Montreal Protocol. First, we want to know what is the ozone depletion, right? Ozone depletion. Ozone. I already told about this depletion. So once again, we'll repeat. So ozone depletion. Ozone depletion is the significant reduction of total ozone present in the atmosphere. So it is due to reaction of O3, right? Means ozone with ozone depleting substances. So that is called ODS, ozone depleting substances, right? So what are the ozone depleting substances? I already told about this greenhouse gases classes, right? So those are chlorofluorocarbons, right? And carbon tetrachloride and methyl chloroform and also methyl bromide, right? So these are the ozone depleting substances, right? So, right. So what is the Montreal Protocol? So Montreal, Montreal means this Montreal, it is a city name in the Canada, right? City name in the Canada. So the Montreal Protocol is a landmark international environmental agreement or treaty, right? So the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer in 16th September 1987, so in Vienna Convention concluded in the year of 1985. So the Montreal Protocol was preceded by the Vienna Convention, right? Vienna Convention for the protection of, what is that? Ozone layer, protection of ozone layer. So which is concluded in the year of 1985. So which talked about the harmful impact of ozone depletion, ozone layer depletion, right? So, and they said that depletion ozone layer, it would lead to incoming of harmful ultraviolet. So that is UVB, ultraviolet B, right? Ultraviolet B, UVB radiations into the Earth's surface, right? So considering the Vienna Convention, so the Montreal Protocol came into force and it was mainly focused on the, what is that? Substances, right? Substances that deplete the ozone layer, right? So this was signed in the 16th September in the year of 1987. So, and it is entered into force from the 1st, right? 1st January 1989, right? 1989. So it was designed to stop or ban the production of ODS and reduce its concentration in the atmosphere to help protect the ozone layer. So now this protocol was mainly proposed to what? Ban, right? Or stop. To ban the production of what? Chlorofluorocarbons, right? CFCs. So if the ozone is broke down, what happens is that so harmful ultraviolet rays can easily penetrate to our skins, right? And it can have some defects on human beings, right? So that's why ozone layer is very, very, very important to us. So there was another idea to substitute the chlorofluorocarbons to hydrofluorocarbons. And these were less reactive and less harmful in comparison to this fluorocarbons. So these came into effect. Again, there was an idea to shift from chlorofluorocarbons and there was a deadline. So that was set for developed nations and the developing nations. Developed nations and the developing nations. So for developed nations, it was suggested by in the year of 1990, 95, they should cut the production of ozone depleting substances. So which is called as ODS, right? ODS. So however, so this deadline was extended to 2005 for the developing nations. So you have the deadline for the developing and developed nations as separate. You remember this word. This is separate for developing and developed nations, right? So later on, there was a ban on chlorofluorocarbons, and this ban talked about complete removal of the chlorofluorocarbons from the refrigeration and aerosol industries, right? Refrigeration and aerosol industries. Just 1 second, Krishna sir. Sir, bye. Sorry for the disturbance. Vishnu sir is calling to me. Right. So then they talked about the global consumption. It has been reduced by 98% by the year of 2008, right? So they talked about phasing out hydrofluorocarbons as well by the year of 2007, and the global production of chlorofluorocarbons, which should ended by the year of 2010, right? And these are the main proposals under the Montreal Protocol. So the Montreal Protocol itself and Vienna Convention was ratified by the 197 nations, right? 197 nations. So these 197 countries have signed in this protocol, so making Montreal Protocol achieves. So the universal ratification, right? So the universal ratification status. So the universal ratification, it means Montreal Protocol is accepted by all the countries around the globe. Remember this. So therefore, it is considered to be the most successful environment protection treaty. So this is the introduction of the Montreal Protocol, right? So, and next we are going to history of the Montreal Protocol. So what is the history? What is about this history? So in early, in the year of 1973, right? So this is important. All of you listen carefully. So right above in your examination, they are asking the question, write about the Montreal Protocol, right? So whatever you know, you write that only, right? So don't confuse that. So history of the Montreal Protocol. So in early 1973, two American chemists, right? So those are Roland and Molina, right? Roland and Molina. So they gave a reaction of how ozone molecules destroy, right? How ozone molecules destroy. So in the year of 1974, so who got Roland and Molina got their work was published in some of the natural journal, right? And in the year of 1976, so the United States National Academy of Science confirmed the scientific readability of their Roland and Molina, their hypothesis on this report, right? So in 1978, the chlorofluorocarbons-based aerosols were banned in certain countries, that namely United States, Norway, Sweden, and Canada, right? So you see this in the year of 1978, the chlorofluorocarbons banned in these states, right? So countries. Next, in the year of 85, right? So up to year 78, and next we are going to 85. So 85, British Antarctic survey scientists, right? British Antarctic survey scientists found incredibly low ozone levels over the Antarctica, right? So, and they published in Nature journal, right? So these were the first measurement of the ozone hole, this ozone hole. Right? So this discovery came as a shock to the scientific community. Why? Because the levels were far lower than anybody had expected. NASA, right? NASA satellite measurements of Antarctica. So they had not found these low ozone levels. However, when the NASA went back and checked their measurements, right? So they have doubt, right? So that's why they went back and checked their measurements. They realized that the satellite, it had been programmed to reject measurements below a certain levels as errors when the original data was reprocessed. The ozone hole happened in the same, right? So, and that's why in 22nd March, the year of 1985, the Vienna Convention for the protection of ozone layer came into existence. So initially, it was signed by just 20 countries, only 20 countries, including most of the major chlorofluorocarbon producers, right? So they agreed to take voluntary measures to reduce ozone depleting substances, right? So you see here in 16th September 1987, right? So you see here 16th September 1987. The Montreal Protocol on 16th September 1987, representatives from the 43 countries signed, right? 43 countries signed them one your protocol on substances. So that declared the ozone layer. They agreed to, what is that? Freeze of production of chlorofluorocarbons at the year of 1986 levels and reduce production by 50% by the year of 1999, right? So then, because it was signed on 16th September, right? So that's why every year we are celebrate as International Ozone Day. Ozone Day. So that is the 16th September. This is the International Ozone Day, right? So the Montreal Protocol entered into force in the 1st January 1989. So after this, those two peoples who are that Roland and Malina. So these two people, brilliant peoples, got Nobel Prize for this award, right? In the year of 1995, right? So now this protocol was mainly proposed to, what is that? Ban or stop the production of chlorofluorocarbons. Chlorofluorocarbons, right? So there was another idea to substitute the chlorofluorocarbons to hydrochlorofluorocarbons. So, and these were less reactive and less harmful in comparison to the chlorofluorocarbons, right? So these came into effect. Again, there was an idea to shift from chlorofluorocarbons, and there was a deadline. So that was set for developed nations and the developing nations, right? So for developed nations, it was suggested by the year of 1995, they should cut the production of ozone depleting substances. So which is called, what is that? ODS, right? Ozone depleting substances. So however, this deadline was extended to 2005 for the developing nations, developing nations. So you have the deadline for developing and developed nations as separate, right? So, and then they talked about the global consumption has been reduced by the 98% by the year of 2008. And they talked about phasing out hydrofluorocarbons in the year of 2007. And the global production of chlorofluorocarbons should be ended by the year of 2008. So now let us talk about how actually Montreal Protocol worked. Right? So this is the history, right? So how Montreal Protocol works. You see. So it is, first one, it is sets out a mandatory timetable to phase out ODS. Mandatory timetable. You remember this word? Timetable is must and should. So phase out ODS. ODS means ozone depleting substances, right? So it's like when you work in a laboratory. What is the timetable? Meaning of timetable means, so when you work in laboratory class, so a timetable is given to reduce the ODS consumption in phases, right? So this timetable sets binding progressive phase out obligations on parties. So it means it will ask a particular part to reduce a particular ODS consumption slowly and steadily. So first you reduce the ODS consumption by 25%, right? 25%, then maybe 75%, and then completely freeze the consumption by the reduce to 100%, right? So that's how it gave progressive phase out timetable, right? Progressive phase out timetable. So the next, the Montreal Protocol targets 96 to 100% ODS. And then next, this timetable, this timetable is revised regularly, right? Revised regularly. So now why this revision? Because this revision is in accordance to scientific advances. It's like a student's syllabus getting upgraded, right? So apart from this main function of binding to the timetable, so there are other responsibilities of the parties, right? So now few of these responsibilities are control of ODS trade, right? Control of ODS, ozone depleting substances trade. So now as a nation, we can either import the ODS or export the ODS, right? Import or export the ODS. So that needs to be in limit only, right? So for seeking this keeping it at track how much ODS is associated to a nation. So these are systems which are known as national licensing systems. National licensing systems. So these systems are like there is this license which is given for import of ODS to particular agents or export of ODS. So and theoretically, a nation knows in advance how much ODS is that either exported or imported in the country. So apart from that, the main important responsibility is data reporting, right? Data reporting, this data reporting. So now this data need to be reported annual basis to Ozone Secretary. So, but mainly how data is reported, it's by following some of the formula, particular formula. So this formula, right? So ODS consumption is equal to, what is that? ODS production, right? ODS production plus ODS import minus ODS export, right? So ODS consumption is equal to ODS production plus ODS import minus ODS export. That is ODS oblique C equal to P plus I minus E, right? So this is the particular formula. So it means a nation can produce its own ODS, right? So it can import minus the exported amount is the total ODS consumption of a particular nation, right? So that needs to be reported annually, right? So now there are meetings, so which occur on a regular basis. So these meetings are also known as are called the amendments. Remember this, right? So this is also very important. Amendments, right? In your examination, they are asking, so what are the amendments, right? So the Montreal Protocol entered into force in the year of, what is that? 1989. So followed by the first meeting in the Helsinki, right? So it is, see, they entered into force in the year of 1985. So in Helsinki, right? So I already told about this, the Montreal Protocol, 16th September of 1987, right? So it representatives from 43 countries signed there, right? And also ozone deplete layer, they agreed to freeze the production of chlorofluorocarbons at 1986 levels and to reduce production by the 57% by the year of 1999, right? So this is the first meeting in the Helsinki, right? So then next we are going to second meeting. So this is the second meeting. So London Amendment, the London Amendment. So that changed the ODS, right? Changed the ODS emissions scheduled by the requiring the complete phase out of chlorofluorocarbons and halogens. And carbon, the chloride, tetrachloride by 2000 year in developed countries, and by 2010 in developing countries, right? So in 2010 developing countries, this methyl chloroform was also added to the list of controlled ODS with phase out in developed countries, right? So targeted in the year of 2005 and 2015 for developing countries. So developed countries also agreed to help developing countries through what is that? Transfer of expertise, technology, and with money, right? So this is the second meeting. So that is London Amendment in the year of 1990, and first one is 1989, right? And next we are going to the Copenhagen Amendment. So this is the fourth meeting, right? This is the fourth meeting. So it is significantly accelerated the phase out of ODS and incorporated hydrochlorofluorocarbons, right? Hydrochlorofluorocarbons. Phase out for developed countries, beginning in the year of 2004. Right? So under this agreement, the chlorofluorocarbons and halogens and carbon tetrachloride and methyl bromide. So these were added for complete phase out in the year of 1996 in developed countries. So in addition, so this methyl bromide, right? Methyl bromide. So methyl bromide consumption of methyl bromide was capped at 1994 levels, right? So this is the fourth meeting. Next, we are going to Beijing. So in the year of Montreal, right? Copenhagen and Montreal, right? So Montreal Amendment. So in the year of 1997. So this is the ninth meeting. So in this amendment or in this agreement, it was included the phase out schedule for hydrochlorofluorocarbons was introduced for developing countries, as well as the deadline for the phase out of methyl bromide was moved forward in developed and developing countries. So in the era 2005 and 2015 respectively, right? So this is the Montreal Amendment. Next, we are going to Beijing Amendment. Right? So Beijing. So this is the 11th meeting. Right? 11th meeting in the year of 1999. So in this amendment, include tightened controls on the production and trade of hydrochlorocarbons were introduced here, right? And bromochloromethane. So this was also added to the list of controlled substances with phase out targeted for 2004. Right? 2004. So this is the Beijing Amendment. So next. So in 2015, in the Montreal Protocol became the first university ratified international treaty, right? So it is signed by all 190 nations or 190 members of the United Nations, right? 190 members, right? And next we are going to Kigali. right? So this is also where they are asking you are in examination, what is the Kigali Amendment, right? So it is in the year of 2016, right? So this is the 28th meeting. You see here 28th meeting. So 28th meeting of the what is to the Montreal Protocol, negotiators from 197 nations having signed a historic agreement to amend the Montreal Protocol in Kigali, right? So Kigali is a capital city of a teeny African country, Rwanda. So on 10 to 14 October in the year of 2016, right? So as per the agreement, so these 197 countries are expected to reduce the manufacture and use of hydrofluorocarbons. So by roughly how much? 80, right? 80 to 85%. 80 to 85% their respective baselines till the year of 2045, right? 2045. So this phase down is expected to arrest the global average temperature rise up to 0.5 degrees Celsius by the year of 2100, right? So the Kigali Agreement is an amendment to Montreal Protocol, right? So in the year of 2016 in Kigali, hydrofluorocarbons were added to the Montreal Protocol. So hydrofluorocarbons were also used as replacement compounds for chlorofluorocarbons. So they do not affect the ozone layer, but they are strong greenhouse gases, right? So what are the important points in Kigali Agreement? Right? So it is a legally binding agreement, right? Legally binding agreement between the signatory parties with non-compliance measures, right? Signatory parties with non-compliance measures. So it will come into effect from the 1st January 2019, provided it is ratified by at least 20 members parties by them. Right? So it has shown a considerable flexibility in approach while setting phase down targets for different economies, accommodating their developmental aspirations and different socio-economic compulsions and also different scientific and technological capabilities, right? So signatories parties, right? So these signatories parties has divided the 3 groups, right? So group 1, group 2 and group 3, right? So these are the 3 groups. So the first group consists of rich and developed economies, right? Like USA, UK and UE countries who will start to phase down the hydrofluorocarbons by the year of 2019 and reduce it to 15% of the 2012 by the year and by 2036, right? And group 2 parties. So this is the second group. So this group consists of emerging economies like China, Brazil, African countries, right? Some of the African countries. So who will start phase down by 2024 and reduce it to 20% of 2020 levels by 2045, right? And this is the second part. And now we are going to third group, right? So third group consists of developing economy, right? So, in some of the hottest climatic countries like India, Pakistan, Iran, Saudi Arabia. So, who will start phasing down hydrofluorocarbons by 2028 and reduce it to 15% of 2024 to 26 till 2047. So these are the signatory parties. So there are three groups here, right? So it also has a provision for a multilateral fund for developing countries for adaptation and mitigation. So the Technology and Energy Assessment Panel, so that is called TEAP, Technology and Energy Assessment Panel. So it will take a periodic review of the alternative technologies and products for their energy efficiency and safety standards, right? So then next we are going to, so why is the Kigali Agreement significant? Why? So why? Because it strengthens the Paris Agreement, right? Paris Agreement, which sets an ambitious targets of restricting the rise in global temperature below the 2 degrees Celsius as compared to pre-industrial levels, right? So unlike the Paris Agreement, right? Paris Agreement, it gives clear and concrete and mandatory targets. So with fixed timelines to the signatory parties to achieve their targets, right? So it would prevent the emissions of hydrofluorocarbons is equivalent to 70 billion tons of carbon dioxide, right? So that's why Kigali Amendment significant is important. So then next, Kigali Agreement in India, right? So India played a very flexible and cooperative role in the whole negotiation processes. So it has agreed on a lenient schedule as it consumes only 3%, right? 3% of hydrofluorocarbons as compared to the other nations like USA 37% and China 27%. You see the difference between, so this is 3%, but USA is 37% and China is 25%, right? So it would be tough for Indian to adhere to this agreement along with Paris Pact, especially when it has embarked on an ambitious Make in India program, that is to increase its industrial production, right? Industrial production. So it should also take into consideration the hot climate conditions and also growing demand for air conditioners, refrigerators, and cars, right? So with growing middle class incomes, right? So while implementing the program. So still, as a responsible nation, so with a global perspective, the Indian government has voluntarily passed the order to stop the production of, what is that? Hydrofluorocarbon 23. So which is a byproduct of commonly used refrigerant, right? Refrigerant. So this will reduce the emission by 100 million tons. That is equivalent of carbon dioxide in next 15 years. How much? Next 15 years, that is 100 million tons. You see how imagination is, right? So this is the Kigali Amendment in India. So implications, what are the implications of Kigali Amendment on India? So in Indian industries, so using hydrofluorocarbons, right? Hydrofluorocarbons like air conditioner industries, automobiles, and also refrigeration industries have some serious implications on financial and technical fronts, right? So in that first one, financial implications. So financial implications. So in that, industries have to either invest in R&D department to find out the substitutes for hydrofluorocarbons, or they have to buy patent substances and technologies from the other MNC companies, right? So consequently, the cost of production, it will increase, which may ultimately shrink the buyer base for their product, right? So next one is technological implications. So this is financial implication and technological implication. So in technological implication, some of the developed nations, right? Developed nations. So it have already started using substitutes of hydrofluorocarbons in their products, and they have a sound technological knowledge about their use, right? So without technology transfer or research, it would be difficult for some domestic industries to compete with them in global as well as domestic market, right? So this is the implications of India. So the Montreal Protocol has been generally very successful. So there is mostly strong compliance with the its regulations, right? So you see this picture, and the major ozone depleting substances have started in the year of 1950, right? You see, so started to, you see how chlorofluorocarbons decrease its levels. So from the year of 1950 to 2040, right? So up to 1980 to 2005 or 6, right? So CFC 113 is very high here, right? So those are decreased in the atmosphere. So we are now starting to see here. So the first sign of the ozone layer beginning to heal, right? See this one. So this phase down is expected to recover the global average temperature, rise up to 0.5 degrees Celsius between 2050 and 2100, right? So this is the Montreal Protocol and ozone depleting. So this is the important question in the examination, right? So now class is over. So I will take tomorrow. Okay. Any doubts, please ask me or message me. Okay. Anybody? Only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 members present. Okay. Any doubts? Okay, right.
Thank you, ma'am.